I'd like now to turn to Ken Lowe. Ken's the CEO of China Branding China Group, a blockchain-driven technology company. Ken, many of our audience may not have heard of Branding China. Maybe you just want to start by introducing who you are and what you do.
So I am the Group CEO of Branding China. Underneath our company, we have a portfolio of companies. One being a digital marketing company, mostly focused on the new area of the blockchain and blockchain companies, or fintech. What we like about this target market is that they're very fast growing, and they have needs that are very different from what typical marketing agencies are and communications companies are able to provide. And this is one area that's we're seeing very, very fast growth. And as some of our speakers have mentioned, being in Hong Kong with over 1,000 fintech companies being set up here, and the really ease of business, ease of doing business here in Hong Kong is a great attraction for many of these companies. The two other companies that we have is one is a brokerage business, basically is allowing for the exchange of cryptocurrencies and other types of digital assets. Getting on board into the blockchain ecosystem. One of the hardest things today is getting onto the ecosystem. But once you get into the ecosystem, you'll see very fast payment, very fast secure payments, and cross-border transfers of payments and transfer of digital assets. And lastly, what we have is a digital assets technology platform, which includes able to white label digital wallets. And exchange platforms. And what this is going to allow is many of small businesses or even medium-sized businesses or even institutions to be able to create their own digital wallets, their own token systems, their own payment systems, their own registry systems. And all of these are based off of blockchain technologies. And what we're trying to do with the Branding China Group is really help companies adapt and harness the power of fintech and blockchain technologies, because there's a lot of noise out there in terms of what blockchain is. One of the things that Matthew has told me to do is maybe just give us a brief rundown on what blockchain is, and so that people can understand what it is. In a very simplest sense, blockchain is a database. It is a database that is put onto the cloud, and what the cloud is really just a consensus network of computers linked together. And there's benefits of having a database on the cloud, and there's some disadvantages. The advantages is first is data integrity, and having the data stored on many different types of servers across regions and across different systems, and this allows for resiliency and redundancy. If you were a bank or a large company, you'd have to build all this redundancy yourself, and that would cost a lot of money. And that's similar to what the internet was. People were building their own private networks, building their own MPLS networks, and that created a lot of silos in terms of networking, and of course that infrastructure is very expensive. And what we've seen finally was everybody moved on to the internet, and transferring the data over the internet. And this is what blockchain is going to help provide for a lot of companies, is being able to leverage public infrastructure and being able to use it for your advantage. And obviously data security, data integrity is going to be very important. And so in the simplest sense, blockchain is a database on the internet or also on the cloud. And how it all works, I mean, it gets very technical, but I'm sure we can talk about that in another session.
Thanks, Ken. Actually, a question here from Malaysia. How do you see blockchain cryptocurrency in the future? How do you see it evolving? And maybe I can add on, given the SFC has now launched this new initiative around digital assets in Hong Kong and digital asset exchanges, how do you see that evolving as well? So maybe if you can deal with blockchain and cryptocurrency first, and then digital assets as a segment. How do you see that evolving?
So as mentioned before, it's really blockchain is a database, and we're moving into a digital economy now, and everything that we know is going to be digitized. And just as Jennifer was telling us about, going from cash or physical assets into a digital payment system, I mean, or digital wallets, I mean, whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. And I know there's, change is one of the hardest things for human beings to to accept, because people don't like change. We're a creature of habit, but as the society starts moving towards this, I mean, slowly, all your friends, all your merchants, all the things that you need to pay for are going to be with digital payments. And so, I can see this as inevitable. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, my mom would never use a smartphone, and she goes, she'd always do voice calling. She would never use WhatsApp. And slowly, all of her friends, even her children, talk less and less on the phone. And finally, she threw in the towel. She downloaded WhatsApp. She bought an iPhone, and now we talk to each other on WhatsApp. And a couple of years ago, having my mom on a digital messaging platform would have been unheard of. But yet, at 60 something, there she is. So I see, many of the challenges we face today in digital acceptance or digital wallets. It's just inevitable, and we will see adoption.
Okay, thanks, Ken. You mentioned 1,000 fintechs in Hong Kong. There are probably even more. You see a big section of those. What are the capabilities and companies that you see, other than your two panelists here, what are the capabilities and companies that you see that are truly exciting and different in the blockchain and crypto area, perhaps?
Well, there's so many, but actually we're just seeing two of the most renowned and exciting places right here on the stage. With WeLabs and their application for the virtual banking and Alipay. These are quite exciting companies already. And I mean, there's a vast majority of every industry actually is doing something in fintech, from registries to trade finance to payment systems to loyalty point solutions. There's just too many actually. Then they're all very exciting. And the most interesting for me in this industry is the passion behind the people. The people that are in this industry, you talk to any one of these, whether they're a startup or they're media or Series D companies. The passion in the people driving these businesses is a very different than any other business that I've ever seen before. And I think even Simon mentioned in the very beginning, banking, it used to be a very exciting place. And at one point I was a banker, but I wouldn't think twice about going back to, or I wouldn't think about going back to a bank ever again.
Ken, you've been a successful entrepreneur both in your current role and then ANX prior to that. Can you share some experiences of what it was like to set up a fintech operation in Hong Kong? What were the great experiences, and perhaps what are some of the challenges?
So one of the things I mentioned before was, or some of the other speakers I mentioned before, is the ease of business here in Hong Kong. You can set up a company, within a day. And it used to be you could open up bank accounts relatively easily, but that's been a little bit of a challenge. But I wouldn't hold that against Hong Kong. It's everywhere in the world. It's tightening up quite a lot. But in terms of the support and the being a financial capital, you have all the infrastructure needed to start a startup to growing very quickly. And with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, you have a good capital markets venue. So I think Hong Kong is very good for that. The other thing about Hong Kong is as Jennifer mentioned, it's situated in a very large trading nation like China, and then you also have connections back into the North Americas, and everybody just kind of melts into Hong Kong as a bridge to meet between the two. So I think that is a very good advantage for the East meets West. So you can be a very westernized company and also being a very Chinese company at the same time in this region.
Actually, can I just put that same question to you, Simon? Now people are throwing money at you. They would all love to invest, but it wasn't always like that. Can you share your experience of what it was like growing up, as it were, in fintech in Hong Kong?
So we started off in January 2013, right, 6 years ago. And you're right. I think fintech was a relatively new subject at that time, right? I still remember when I quit the bank. I was telling the CEO of the bank that I'm going to quit the bank to start a fintech startup. And she said, I don't know what is a fintech startup, but if you don't have a job, you can always come back, we'll give you a job. Now, obviously, if you fast forward 6 years later, all the banks claim themselves to be a tech or fintech company, right? I think we were quite fortunate because I think when we first started fundraising, going to the market at that time, we were probably the first group of bankers who leave a serious job to start a fintech startup. Well, I'm not saying a fintech startup is not serious. It's also serious, but people see banking a lot more serious than fintech, right? At that time. So
Parents do anyway.
Parents do anyway. Thankfully, my wife was extremely supportive. And so I think an early start definitely helps. Hence, right now, I think when we compare ourselves, we benchmark ourselves with a lot of people raising money at the same time, we've been around for a little bit longer, being able to build a little bit more track record. But we definitely see the Hong Kong fintech scene, be it from regulators, private sector, investors and everything, right? They've grown tremendously over the last couple of years. And I would probably place this as one of the most exciting fintech centers in the world right now in Hong Kong.
There's a question from the audience around security. I knew this would come up. I'll open it to any of you. But what about security, and both in terms of the user and the client is the question. How can you do it? Who wants to take that one? Whoever wants to take that one.
I mean, security to us is extremely important. I think it comes into different parts of it. I think one is user security, data privacy. I think there are different parts of this, right? It's extremely important because you remember at the end of the day, when you touch upon financial product, trust is extremely important, right? So how do you build that trust, right? I think for us, it comes through in a couple of ways. What we've managed to prove and achieve over the years is something very interesting. In the past, remember, you always go to the bank to borrow money. People believe that seeing someone face-to-face is the most trusted form of transaction, right? But what we've proven is actually not. Because if you replace that human interaction and replace it with interaction where you can verify with a lot of data, that actually, that hundreds and thousands of data points is actually a lot more accurate than that one data point of someone seeing you face to face and looking at your Hong Kong ID. So that is extremely important. I'll give you a stat. We have, over the course of the last 6 years, we have probably never met any of the borrowers. Our identity fraud loss is close to 0. Versus, if you go to a bank to borrow money, probably your identity fraud loss in a country like China, as a percentage of total fraud, can be as high as 20 to 30, 50%. So I think that's a proof point. Actually, data and technology actually can make security better. And the other funny side about that is a lot of the problem with data security is actually your staff, collusion. Once you remove the human factor, actually the world sometimes become a better place.
Okay. And Jennifer, what about the user?
Yes. I think, as I show in my chart, is that a lot of users, they have this barrier to adopt e-payment is because they think that, okay, they will, there's a high potential, of being a leakage of their personal data. But if just looking, in Hong Kong, for us, say for example, you just have a Hong Kong mobile number, you already can register as our user, okay? It is only that when you need to, carry out certain what we consider as high-risk transactions. Say, for example, P2P transfer. Say, for example, cross-border remittance. Then actually, because that's also requirement, to against the AML. So we need a user to upload, say, their ID card, and also may even say the passport information. But we are not. I should say that, okay, we were not asking for users' information more than what we need, okay? And also is that we actually are well governed by the, Hong Kong data privacy audience. So we follow all the rules and regulations, and everything is, under good control.
One of the other points that often comes up here is one of your shareholders, and has quite renowned data capability to monitor suspicious transactions, where transactions are occurring, how, and using that information to identify anomalies, so that the data itself, going back to the point that Simon made about the use of big data, is actually creating a more secure environment, not just for the organization, but for the company. Is that something that you see, and how important is that to your business and that trust agenda?
Actually, I'm always kidding with Simon that actually we are a risk management company, right? You know, for any fintech or tech field, most of our resources actually is all placed on the risk management. You rightly point out, we have a very strong and powerful database analysis. We actually, as I said, we don't need to say, oh, this is Matthew. I don't care about whether that's Matthew or not. But actually, we look at the transaction data of each user or each wallet, and based on their, behavior, spending pattern, we know that, okay, I would say we can actually project an account profile of that user, and also we can help to protect them. Say, for example, we understand, say, like you always, you as a user, you may always go to a certain place, spend about like $200. And so that is your pattern, you mainly for some micro payment. And suddenly you just go to a jewelry shop, okay? Just want to buy something very expensive. Actually, based on those, behavior, we may actually immediately just, hold your transaction, and we'll send you a notification, ask you some more question, maybe give you an OTP or something. So I would say your asset is quite well protected.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Ken, maybe if we look forward a few years, let's go forward to, say, 5 years' time. What are the things how do you think the landscape will look in relation to blockchain? Blockchain, if I go back 2 years, 3 years, everyone was blockchain this, blockchain that, just call my company blockchain and it goes up in value. We haven't quite seen that coming to fruition in quite the way others expected. Do you think in the next 5 years we'll see more of the promise that was touted a few years ago starting to come to fruition? And what will it look like in Hong Kong?
You're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of PR going on. But actually, with all that noise and PR, what you've actually noticed is that 6 years ago, if you were doing something with blockchain, most people would be like, shrug, what's that, right? But as we saw even in last month's Fintech week that was run by the HKMA and the SFC, I mean, it's a pretty big deal now. I mean, I won't say what the regulators used to, how they used to interface with the non-regulated entities. But now you've seen, HKMA, SFC, these guys are, out and about at all the conferences, even hosting these conferences. And what some of the main topics are is blockchain. And why is blockchain, out there, and what makes it so important? So one of the things we mentioned about before was, we have a database on the cloud and being accessible and having data integrity. With the talks of security and, with all the data breaches and things that are coming online is, what we're seeing is that, a single point of failure, in databases is actually a very big deal. And, there is no foolproof way to secure a database other than, like I said, distributing it further and having it, distributed across many other types of computers. Then you'll have a better chance of keeping data integrity. And this is why, another reason why blockchain is one of the key tools that people are looking in terms of security. This, with the invention or the application of multi-signature wallets, this is, maybe a new concept for some people. Most people are still with 2FA or two-factor authentication. With multi-signature wallets, that means, no one person can move funds or make payments. And definitely, I mean, any database, you can write all these functions into the database itself or the wallet, but this comes, built into the blockchain protocol. What you're going to see is, much more adoption of this type of technology. And at BC Group or Branding China, we take security very, very, very seriously. And we may be new to this Branding China group, but the senior management team, the technical development team, we've got 6 years experience in this field. And as in the blockchain world, our servers, our wallets are attacked every second. We are constantly under attack, but how we mitigate this is, obviously we have a lot of risk mitigation strategies. We have compartmentalization strategies, and also we have, multi-layer security protocols. And all of this is the only way you can really secure an organization and data. And it's not one key or one way to do it. And this is, blockchain just being one piece of it, but we feel strongly about blockchain because it's, a lot of the protocols, a lot of the features are already built in, and then you only have to build at the application layer. So that's what I see in terms of the future. And again, Hong Kong being a fintech capital and a financial center, I think we'll see a much rapid adoption of this technology. And again, you've seen all of the institutions. You've seen Fidelity. You've seen almost every financial institution talking about adopting some kind of fintech or blockchain technology. So that just kind of shows where this industry is going.
Maybe I can supplement a bit. Actually, Alipay HK, we adopt blockchain in our cross-border remittance. We actually launched the first, e-wallet to e-wallet cross-border remittance, from Alipay HK to Gcash in Philippines, adopting a blockchain technology. But from a user's point of view, they don't know, because they just find that they just like, what they do, they just key a few, push several buttons, and then they will just immediately, within 3 seconds, they can, remit money, to Philippines, another e-wallet.
Okay. Following on, in your presentation, Jennifer and Simon, you both mentioned Hong Kong as a hub. Simon, you've already moved into at least 2 other markets, and Jennifer, your organisation, at least through Ali, is in many other Asian markets through different partnerships. What does Hong Kong mean for you as a hub, and how do you see that evolving? Maybe Jennifer, you take that first.
As mentioned, I think that Hong Kong actually have quite a lot of good infrastructure and environment which can support it as a financial hub. And same thing for the whole Ant Financial. We consider Hong Kong is although Hong Kong is small, but we consider Hong Kong is a very important strategic location for a lot of new ideas. We're talking about cross-border using blockchain for remittance. We'll use Hong Kong as a place to test the market. Because Hong Kong is small, but Hong Kong is actually very complicated, okay? We got quite a lot of, players. I think it's highly competitive. And we also have, as I mentioned, quite a good, infrastructure here. So I think Hong Kong riding on its competitive edge, it can be a very successful financial hub in the region.
Okay, Simon?
I think for us, as I shared, Hong Kong is an extremely strategic market for us. The headquarters is still based in Hong Kong. I mean, we love the talent, the regulatory environment, the ease of setting up companies and tax here. I think a lot of people mentioned that, right? But I think that allows us to scale faster, and also once you build a successful fintech company in Hong Kong, as you scale internationally, it adds credibility. Meaning, when people ask you where's your headquarters, you say, "Oh, I run a fintech company. I'm in Hong Kong." People say, "Okay, great. You guys must be pretty professional." And obviously, from our professional background, it adds additional credibility. I think that is one thing, right? So we talk about being a small, homogeneous population, easy to test. The region is renowned for being professional. And as we scale to more and more markets, what we found is there are differences and also similarities across market segments, across markets as well. Meaning nowadays we are able to bring back experiences in Hong Kong and China, Indonesia, back to Hong Kong and vice versa. So I think this cross-transfer or pollination of ideas become extremely useful for us in terms of generating new technology, ideas, and hypotheses.
In your presentation, Simon, you talked a little bit about the use of big data and automation of lending. And in some respects, that capability is easier in a market like Hong Kong versus a market like the US, where you have Reg B and you have other regulations which limit your ability to deny credit to an individual without explaining to that individual why the credit was denied. Can you give us a bit of a picture of how you actually use big data? So what does it do in terms of the underwriting process? Because I think it would be useful to go a little bit deeper into how do the algorithms work?
Sure, I would love to. So basically, right, I think if you look at, I'll give an example. Let's say markets like China, Indonesia, where there is no centralized credit bureau, meaning when an individual wants to borrow money, you don't know how he or she has performed in the past. So how can you underwrite someone? That is a real problem, right? And it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for banks as well, right? So the solution that most companies, banks have is how do they vet someone face-to-face, spend a lot of time processing. So that's extremely expensive for both the banks and the individual. So the net result is then banks have to say, I need to lend you at least, let's say, a few $100,000 to make it worthwhile. So then it creates another problem, which is financial inclusion. Right. So how we do it is basically if we can automate everything using mobile analytics. So imagine this, right? Your mobile phone captures, analyzes the decisions you make, and through such decisions, we can get a very deep understanding of who you are and how you make decisions. So through 100% is all customer authorized, we analyze those data, and it allows us to profile you for risk and prove your identity, and through which we can drastically reduce the risk and enable us to lend to individuals. As a very simple example I can share with you is very, very interesting is even what time do you lend, what time do you borrow money from us makes a difference. For example, you have 24 hours a day, right? What we want to track is what time of the day do you think about you want to borrow money? When you think about when you think about you want to borrow money and you have the ease of your mobile phone next to you, you press that WeLab button. So what time of the day do you press that button? What we've discovered is people who press that button between 1 to 6 a.m. in the morning, where you're supposed to be sleeping, actually generate the highest risk. So there are even like very simple behavioral patterns you can just generate from there. Obviously, we don't use that as a risk underwriting criteria, or else we just reject everyone during 1 to 6 a.m. That would be the end of this, right? But of course, obviously, it gets a lot more sophisticated. But just a very simple proof point of behavior actually can translate into credit worthiness.
Okay, thanks. We've only got a few minutes left, so maybe one of the questions from the audience is around talent. Maybe I'll put it to all of you. It was mentioned that Hong Kong is a magnet for talent, and some of the initiatives around virtual banking and others have helped attract talent to Hong Kong. But nevertheless, it's a pain point. It's a pain point for fintech. Ken, how do you deal with this in your business, and what's your advice for policy setters?
I want to start this one first because as we've seen, this being a fintech capital and attracting all these new companies here, it has actually put a real strain on the labor market. So that means hiring here is if we have a very finite population, so hiring here is very difficult. And the reason why I was so anxious to get on here is first I was like, is anyone looking for a job or want to join this exciting place called Fintech? I mean, definitely come apply to us.
Okay. Simon, do you want to? How do you deal with the talent challenge?
I think it has been a challenge, and it will increasingly be a very important challenge as we roll out a virtual bank, as well as we get more players fighting for talents, right? But I think part of our solution is how do we actually combine, how do we see the talent pool is not just from Hong Kong, but from the whole Greater Bay Area, right? So we started having specialized centers in Hong Kong, and then have a different specialized center in Shenzhen. For example, Shenzhen hosts our tech development center, which sits around 200 people, right? I think it will be extremely difficult to find 200 software developers in Hong Kong itself, right? So we started leveraging on the strength cross-border. With the new infrastructure, the new bridge, high-speed railway and stuff like that, it's drastically lowered the cost of traveling and hence the cost of communication. So even with existing infrastructure for us, door-to-door, Hong Kong office to Shenzhen office is 1 hour. So I can go there, have a meeting full day, and be back home by dinner.
Jennifer?
Actually, I share the same as Simon. I also got a technology center in Shenzhen. Yeah, I think about close to about 40% of my staff actually is in Shenzhen, doing those technology things. But I think in Hong Kong, the problem I think for hiring talent is not only just whether you get the right person. So usually we take a very long hiring process. For Alipay Hong Kong, I think it's very famous. We always got the complaint from the headhunters. say, you know, why we take such a long process, they need to interview so many rounds. Because we think that to find the right person is most important. Not because how well you are qualified, but actually whether those talents share the same vision, share the dream, and they are very passionate. That's very important. Yeah.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panel. It's been a fascinating discussion. A few messages that I'd like to leave you with. As someone who is passionate about Hong Kong and China in particular, I travel around the world talking a lot about what I see in this part of the world. And most of the people I talk to have no clue about what's happening in Hong Kong. There's a lot going on in the China market, and that is truly world leading. But there's also a huge amount going on here. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to get that message out. So I hope you've heard a little bit about some of the exciting things that are happening around fintech in Hong Kong, and in some of the ways in which Hong Kong is leading the charge. So with that, I'd like to ask you to give a round of applause for our panelists.